Hi everyone, this is part 2 of Hardened Heart. There's only a couple more points I wanted to make and in this study. So if we look at Zechariah 8:12, yea, they made their hearts as an adamant stone, lest they should hear the law and the words which the Lord of hosts hath sent in his spirit by the former prophets. Therefore came a great wrath from the Lord of hosts. Yea, they made their hearts as an adamant stone. So, what does that mean, adamant stone? Well, I looked up the word adamant, and adamant stone, an ancient substance of impenetrable hardness, derived from the Greek word for unconquerable, unbreakable substance, someone or something incredibly firm or stubborn. So if we think of how it says they made their hearts as an adamant stone. So these people, it shows that they themselves made their hearts as an adamant stone. And that's a hardened heart, but as an adamant stone shows how unbelievably hard someone could actually harden their own heart. Because when we see that an adamant stone is a substance of impenetrable hardness, it's not penetratable, this type of hardness, an adamant stone. It's so hard that it cannot be penetrated. So in no way, no how could the hardness of this stone be penetrated in any way, which is how the Bible is speaking of these people's hardened hearts. That is crazy. And it's derived from the Greek word for unconquerable. So an adamant stone, unconquerable, that referring to the hardened heart. An adamant stone, they made their hearts as an adamant stone. So unconquerable. That's wow. Their heart was so hard that no one could conquer it. That's how hard someone's heart is possibly able to be made by them, in this case. Isn't that something? An unbreakable substance. Wow. So they made their hearts as an adamant stone. And adamant means an unbreakable substance. That's really pretty sad that someone can harden their own heart to the point that it is unbreakable. There's no breaking it. There's no, it's that hard. That's how much they've hurt. Can you imagine your heart being so hard, as being explained of all these things? And it says someone or something incredibly firm or stubborn. Incredibly stubborn. I guess so. If their heart is impenetrable, their heart is unconquerable and unbreakable. That's crazy. And we can look at the footnotes of that same. No, this one is the footnotes of John 12:37 and 39. I just wanted to add that. They still would not believe. God's ancient people should have responded when God sent his Messiah. They should have seen the significance of the signs he did. Remember that we talked about them being hardened of heart because they had seen all the signs he did, and yet didn't even believe the next sign he did. After seeing all those signs, they didn't even believe. So their heart was hardened, and it had to do with unbelief in that case. They could not believe. It doesn't mean that the people in question had no choice. They purposely rejected God and chose evil. That explains that God in turn brought them on a judicial blinding of eyes and hardening of hearts. Yet many Jewish leaders did believe in Jesus as the Messiah. But these ones, the unsaved Jewish people in this case previous, they purposely rejected God. And in this case, God brought on them a judicial blinding of eyes and hardness of hearts. He brought that on them. But once again, we see he brought that hardening of their hearts, the unsaved Jews there, because they did not believe in Jesus. They didn't believe in the signs that he did, and they rejected him. And that just shows again that they had an opportunity to believe. So we have to remember that. They had an opportunity and opportunities to believe through all the signs and wonders that Jesus did, that they saw, and that said they saw many signs. And yet they chose to not believe it. And they still rejected Christ. They still would not believe in him. So God, in that case, after he gave them opportunity to believe and they rejected him on all counts, he blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts. But he gives us free will to choose. And in that case, that's what happened to those guys. And then the wrath of God was on them, for sure. Okay, we have one more. Maybe two more. Hebrews, I think there's one more. 3:8. Harden not your hearts as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness, when your fathers tempted me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. We go down to 13, verse 13. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So, this is a plea to harden not your heart, as in the provocation, as in the temptation in the wilderness. So, obviously, God doesn't want us to harden our hearts because from what we've seen from these other scriptures and what we've, he wants us to believe in all the miracles Jesus does. He wants us today even to believe everything Jesus said, everything Jesus taught, everything Jesus does, everything also of miracles, signs, wonders, all of these things that Jesus does, healings. He wants us to not harden our hearts. In other words, not get into a place of unbelief and not believe these things that Jesus did. In turn, if someone does that, they've hardened their hearts. And so he gives a call here not to harden your hearts. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So we can see here that we need other believers to uplift and comfort one another, exhort daily, this says. And it's important to have other believers. And lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. While it is said, today if ye will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation. So, Exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So when we don't, as believers, you know, get together with other believers and be built up and comforted and minister to one another and build each other up, you know, constantly building each other up, exhorting one another. You know, it's easy to fall into sin. It's easy to be hardened because because you're not getting that comfort and that building up of the body and that ministry, and so you know it's easy to get depressed and fall into sin on your own and get hardened. You know, there's nobody there to give you a hand up, and if you're in isolation, you definitely can get depressed and hardened and all of that. So that's a call, you know, to not harden your hearts. And I guess that's about it. Just thought it very interesting to hear that the extent of the adamant heart, the hardening heart, that how impenetrable it is and how unconquerable and unbreakable that is, to actually think that that is your heart, that could be your heart to that extent of you hardening your own heart. That is really sad. Okay, well, God bless everybody, and we'll talk to you later.